Do you know your parenting personality? I didn't know mine until I spoke with Evie and Sarah. Hey ladies, I'm back, and today I'm really excited about this conversation. I am such a huge fan of conscious parenting. It was the foundation of how I started my business. It was my why for changing. And over the years, I have been pulling back the layers. And of course, those damn kids keep mirroring back to me the parts within myself where I need to still grow and heal and take more courageous action. And as long as you're committed to this journey, it's not all or nothing. Just being one, I'm always like, I love the perspective of being 1% better every single day. You get there over time. And as you continue to grow and evolve as a human and as a parent and as a caregiver, you see that there is this whole other world of parenting. There's this whole other world of being human. And I ran into Evie and Sarah, a few years ago. I think I was on their podcast first. And they have, I believe their podcast is called Modern Manners for Moms and Dads. And then they wrote a book. And so today we're talking about the book, but they actually have multiple different personalities. And you go through one of their quizzes and you kind of understand yourself a little bit more. It's like the Enneagram or human design or any of those other, lists and checklists and quizzes that love to tell you who you are. I love using these things as a self-awareness tool because one, we're constantly trying to put ourselves in a box. We're constantly trying to be like, I need to be more like that person, comparing ourselves, judging ourselves, shaming ourselves. That doesn't get us, more aligned, happy, and content. So when I find a quiz or I find some type of way to learn more about myself, I use it as data and I use it as a reflector to really help me say, oh, this makes sense. This is how I can approach it differently, or this is how can I approach it this way. So check out Evie and Sarah's book, Modern Manners for Moms and Dads. It lends a serious helping hand to new parents. This guide includes parenting tips, lists, charts, pop quizzes, personal antidotes, and practical advice. Their podcast, their book, I don't know. I just love them. So let's dive in to having a chat with Evie, which is spelled Evie, and Sarah, Sarah. And you can check them out on Instagram as well, at Evie and Sarah. So Evie, Sarah, Evie and Sarah. Let's dive in. Welcome, Evie and Sarah.
Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm. I got like, and then it was talking to me. Did you hear Zoom talking to me?
No.
Oh, it said something. I was like, dang, it must have had a upgrade since the last time I've been on here. Maybe because there's two of you, I'm not sure. So I'm really excited for this conversation. I've been on your podcast as well 2 times. No.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I just want to dig deeper. There's probably a child or a dog trying to get in my room, but I want to dig deeper. You have a new book. Your book's been out for a little while. Modern Manners for Moms and Dads, Practical Parenting Solutions for Sticky Social Situations.
Yes.
How long has this book been out?
Since October of 2020.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the feedback you've been getting?
We've been getting a lot of great feedback from parents, not only that it is, offers really refreshingly realistic, practical, down-to-earth advice, but also that the parenting personality quiz and framework that we built into it is giving people a lot of room for introspection and growth.
I love that. Introspection and growth is essential. One of my biggest goals, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, is this is not like a how-to guide.
Right.
This is introspection and growth.
Right.
So let's talk about that. What are, how did you come together? a little bit of the backstory of how you came together as women and parents to make a difference.
This is one of my favorite stories. So it was about, 10 years ago, 10 years ago now. Yes.
Yeah.
I moved to the DC area with my husband and my then 1-year-old. And then my husband left to go to Afghanistan about 3 weeks after that. So I was all by myself in this new area, in this townhouse that we had rented. And it was a wonderful area, very beautiful. But I was by myself. And, I had just become a stay-at-home mom. I was a teacher. And so all of these changes were happening, and we were moving, and I was on my own, and I had this baby who wasn't really talking yet. So it just sort of felt very isolating. And I really just was trying to figure out ways to fill my day. And I wasn't feeling good mentally, emotionally. I just wasn't feeling happy, or, I just felt very anxious and nervous all the time. Oh my gosh, I'm responsible for this little person and there's nobody else here. And, who am I going to call if something breaks or I need something, or who am I going to go to the playground with? So I had noticed that this other young mom was living next door to me, literally sharing a wall in the townhouse complex. And she had a baby girl. So one day I went and knocked on her door, because there was a pool across the street that my son and I went to all the time. And I knocked on her door and I said, "Hey, I'm Sarah, and this is my son. I noticed that you have a baby. Do you want to go to the pool?" And that person was Evie. And she said, yes. And we went to the pool that day. And when we were swimming, we realized we were both, newly stay-at-home moms, teachers, parents of 1-year-olds. We had husbands who worked a ton. And we just started hanging out all the time. I mean, go for walks in the morning. We would play in the playground in the afternoon. We would do drop off and pick up for preschool as they got older. And then when the kids turned about 3, almost 4, I moved away, and then she moved away. As these walks and all this time that we spent together, this sisterhood that we created grew into our brand and grew into the community that we try now to give other parents, because we knew and felt and still feel to this day, even though we haven't lived near each other for 7 years, that our relationship and our friendship is a lifeline to our parenting, to our identities, to our to our growth and our confidence as women and as moms.
I love that. What a love story. A beautiful love story.
It is a love story. I always let Sarah tell it because she just shares all the emotions behind it. We were just two little lost souls. We were in this huge transition period of our life, and we needed people. Sarah was new to the area. I was the first in my friend group to have a baby. I was 26. I was pretty young, and I needed to find my people, and someone just showed up right at my door, and I was like, "Oh, there she is."
I love that. And I love how, this kind of brings out the conversation around community, right? Mm-hmm. And we do live in a culture that is all about individuality and independence, and I can do it myself, and look how strong I am. Look at Superwoman. I remember I live in Canada, so there's it's called Kijiji. It's kind of like Craigslist. And I put up an ad to start a teen mom group, because I was 18 when I had my son. And there was 2 or 3 women, and one of them, we became really, really close, and we still go back and forth on Facebook a lot. And when, the book came out, she bought the book, and it was just sometimes you don't even talk to these people all the time, but there's that mutual connection and understanding that you have of we have similar stories, and there's connection there, and the importance of community. Because I remember at that moment, I felt severely isolated. And I always tell people, you need to create what you desire. And I love how Sarah was I needed something. I knocked on the door. The 20 seconds of insane courage. I'm doing this.
I always say that as a military spouse, we know that we don't have time for BS, because we're usually in a place for a small amount of time. So we kind of have to cut through it and find our friends, because we're not with family. We're not with, and a lot of times we get community through our spouse's jobs. But in this particular location, I didn't have that. So it was even more important for me to find someone. And, that's actually in the book too, is I've shared my tips of how to make friends, because I had to do it so many times.
It's like online dating.
It is.
It is like online dating because people have this impression that if you just find somebody else who has a child in the age range as your kids or somebody who happens to be a parent, like you will naturally become friends. And that just simply isn't true. All parents are not built alike. We all bring our own personal experiences and philosophies to it. So you have to really click on a number of levels. And so that's the piece that I think is missing sometimes when we talk about building community. I went to so many moms groups, trying to, find those people that I was going to connect with, and just tried and failed because I thought that parenting was the thing that was going to bring us together. And that isn't enough. There's more to it. It's multidimensional.
So let's get into that identity.
Okay.
I think we've all, regardless if it's parenting, it could be something else, but we've all there's that commonality, that connection piece. And you're like, okay, so now I need to go to these groups. Now here's the community, but there's something on the inside that's saying, not this, this is out of alignment. And I want to dive deeper into this losing yourself to motherhood and how to redefine yourself outside of that role. Cause I think there's a lot of guilt and shame there. Who wants to start? Tell me your stories.
I think that for me, one of the things early on in my parenting I did not realize was that I wanted to be more than a mother. I put my teaching career on hold to stay at home with a little baby, and I thought that was going to be 100% fulfilling for me. And I pretty quickly realized it was not. For me, I needed additional stimulation. I needed something more. And so when Sarah came to me when I had probably a 1-year-old, and she said to me, hey, do you want to start a mommy blog? And this was back in 2012 when that was like a big thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted to have a mommy blog. I felt a little bit of resistance because on the one hand, I said to myself, this sounds really fun and it sounds exciting and who knows where it could take us. And on the other hand, I felt a little bit of guilt because I said, well, hold on, I'm a mom. I asked to be a stay-at-home mom. If I devote some of my time now to writing these long introspective essays, which I loved doing, am I taking something away from my child? Mm-hmm. And of course, now 10 years later, I can chuckle about that because it is so misguided. But that was the feeling that I came into it with. And so I don't know, Sarah, you chime in too, because I'm sure that whatever prompted you to bring this idea to me the first time around, you must have been grappling with some of this too.
Well, I had already been working as a freelance writer before I had my son. So before I had my son, I was teaching and writing, and then I stopped teaching and I continued to write. And as I was writing, and I was writing for Yahoo at the time and a couple of other places, and someone said to me, you should have a blog. And I was like, yeah, I love to write. I've always wanted to write. And writing had always been a passion of mine. It's always been one of my dreams to write books. And so I asked Evie to be a part of it too, because I wanted to do it with her. I didn't want to do it alone. And she and I had so many amazing conversations that it just felt natural for me to ask her to be part of it. I didn't necessarily struggle that as much as she did with the time, because I felt like writing to me had always been something I wanted to pursue. That was never going to stop. It couldn't. It was I had too much inside me that had to come out. I just had to keep writing. For me, though, it was leaving the house, feeling like I can't leave the house without my kids because my job is to be there for them. And even now, my kids are virtual schooling and, I could leave the house, but, I have someone here helping me with the baby, but I don't because they might need me, and so I still have some of that guilt of oh, did I give them enough time today? And I have 4 children. So I'm always at the end of the day thinking that child didn't get this, or I did this with this one, but not with this one. So for me, the guilt really hasn't gone completely away. And I've made choices in my professional life for the last 11 years that would prioritize my kids over everything else. Even though it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily the best for maybe my career or our financial situation, but I still, and it's because that's what I want. I want to prioritize my time with them. And that's a choice. That's a deliberate choice that I've made without kind of sacrificing this. But then Evie and I still published a book and did all this other stuff. But that's on my time. I
want to say something else though about this identity piece, because once we actually started doing what we were doing, writing, and then in 2016 it became podcasting, and then it became, okay, we're going to write a book. Once I really got that identity within myself that like, oh, I have this other piece. Yes, I'm a mother, but I have this other thing that I do that is uniquely mine. And then I felt empowered by it. I started to notice that when I would be out with my kids, people would not ask me who I was. And I started to get really irritated by the fact that when I would bring my kids to a play date and I would have an opportunity to interact with another parent, the conversation stayed at the child level. It was all about like what our kids like and where we like to go and like which fast food restaurants we take them to or avoid. And it was just so surfacey. And I was craving the opportunity for somebody to say to me, hey, what do you do? What kind of line of work are you in? Who are you outside of parenting, basically? And that conversation is just so lacking. I still complain about it today. It's like when you go to a cocktail party, remember when those used to happen, and somebody says to you, oh, what do you do? If you lead with, I'm a mom, the conversation dies right there. They walk away. It's so painful. It pains me to think about it.
Yeah. I like to say, what are you passionate about?
I love that.
Yeah. Because someone asked me this morning, and the more diverse my work gets, I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that question anymore of like, what do you do? And at this stage, if people are like, tell me about your kids, I'm like, I don't want to. Like, you don't care. You don't even know my family. I'm not even engaging in this conversation. But it's always women who ask me that question. Like, I was at the gym this morning and the trainer is a male and he's like, oh, it's a holiday here where I am in Canada. And he's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, do you have today off or something like that? He didn't know what I do professionally. I just said, oh, I'm self-employed. I'm like, I don't have time to like get into what I do. But he's like, oh, that's great. You can have flexible hours. But if it was a female trainer, she would have asked me about my kids or something and like who's watching them or whatever. And I literally just stare at people now and just do like the odd blank. And I'm like, I don't want to have this conversation. Like, seriously, I'm here to like, soul fulfilling, like stop.
But I think
you're
it's
a
also,
woman.
It's also different as your kids get older too, because when they're little, when they're really young, it's about the same stuff. It's about sleeping, it's about eating, it's about crawling and walking. And there's that undercurrent of competition, like, oh, well, my child's doing this and but you're all talking about the same things.
Yeah.
But as kids get older, it does seem a little bit of a violation because once they pass into that school age, every child is so different. And so what you just said about like, oh, you don't know my family, it's very true. Every family is so different and has so many different layers that it's really hard to answer that question. It almost feels like, why are you asking me about those people over there? Like you're standing in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like you said, it is surface. It's almost like, oh, how's the weather outside? Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm craving that intellectual soul conversation. And I think let's go into the conversation around how we can get so stuck in the mundane, the daily grind, sleep, like routines and all of this stuff, regardless if children are younger or older, because mine are now 8, 11, and 16. And yes, my sleep is better, but not when a 16-year-old is out and you don't know, when they say they're going to be home at a certain time and you can't control that, right? So it's a new level, a new devil. And it's this comparison trap of like, oh, it'll be better, it'll be better when this happens and this happens. And it's like, it just changes. And then your worries and your guilt changes. But you get into this trap of like, this is your career. This is your career around like raising humans, and that part of yourself that you're losing becomes disconnected from you. And before I hit record, I was telling you how, sometimes when I'm a challenger. So I like to challenge how people think, and I'll be like, okay, who are you without that story? And people want to really defend their suffering. I'm like, listen, people used to ask me who I was all the time. And I'm like, I am a mother. Like, don't ask me about anything else. I'm a mother. This is who I am. I got to wear this badge of honor, everything I do, because if you took that away from me, I didn't know who I was outside of that role. And I'm curious the parallels that you find with the community that you work with and yourselves, how that showed up. Like, who am I outside of this?
This is where our framework that we came up with really has to do with that answer. Because we have a framework that helps parents understand themselves, which then helps them make more connecting decisions with their kids and their spouses, right? So you can either be a fireball parent, a crescent parent, or a constellation parent. And the basic idea behind that is, whose needs do you prioritize viscerally first in different situations? Fireballs prioritize their own needs. Crescents prioritize their kids' needs. Constellations prioritize society needs or those around them first. It doesn't mean that if you're a constellation, doesn't mean that you never prioritize yourself. It just means that when given a situation, the first thing you think of is other people, right? So when it comes to identity, crescents, which I am a crescent mostly, have the hardest time identifying outside of their parenthood. These are the parents who prioritize their kids first. These are the advocates, the protector parents, the nurturer parents. These are parents who might have a career in teachers, that kind of, children-focused careers. So they love kids. But if you ask a crescent parent, when was the last time you sat on the couch? They're like, I don't sit on the couch. What do you do for self-care? I don't do self-care. I don't have time for that. My kids need me all the time. Okay. Who are you outside of being a mom? I don't need to be anything outside of being a mom. Okay. How old are your kids? And usually the next answer is they're little. And so it's like, okay, but this is not going to work long-term. Come back to me in 4 years, in 3 years, in 5 years. Like, we have to get you past that. You were somebody before you were a mom, and you're still that somebody. What do you love? What are you passionate about? What do you want to do? What do you dream of? And those parents, we can get them on that path of self-care. We have this pyramid where self-care is at the very, very bottom before anything else with our kids, because we feel like we really, especially those types of parents, fireballs don't have this issue. They're actually really good at it. But crescent parents really do. And it's something that we work with a lot of parents on. And I'm a crescent parent, and Evie was a crescent parent. So we identify with it personally and know that struggle is hard, but it's really, really important to get you to the other side so that you can feel confident in yourself and you can feel like you do have something to say that isn't start with, today my child did,
And are you identify as one and can pivot to another?
Yeah, definitely. And that's sort of what we're hoping for. The goal is to try to find some balance. So if you are a crescent parent and you instinctively prioritize your child's needs, when you go too far to that extreme, we say you're like a full moon parent. You're like in your child's face. You're not giving them any space to breathe. You're not teaching them self-soothing techniques. You're just like always there all the time. I'm the only person who can do it. Nobody else can put my baby to bed. I can't hire a babysitter. I couldn't possibly sit down. And these parents, when they shift into this extreme, we have to take a completely different approach with them than we would with a different parent. So these are the parents that when they say, well, I can't possibly take a break, my child needs me, we will say to them, okay, but we understand that, but the research shows that when you have need satisfaction, when you identify your own needs and you attend to them, you're actually a better parent. So we have to start reframing things for them. This is for your child. Mm-hmm. Let's start there. You want to be the best parent you can possibly be. So let's figure out how we can make that happen. It does actually start with you taking care of yourself, because when you feel burnt out, when you feel overwhelmed and completely stressed, you have a shorter fuse. You cannot be a supportive parent. You're less empathetic. You're more likely to be controlling, yelling at your kids, blaming them for things that aren't really their fault. If we want to get you to that really healthy place of getting into that positive parenting zone, it actually does start with you possibly sitting on the couch. Mm-hmm. And then we go into all this resistance around, I don't even know what I would do if I had free time. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what I would want to do. And we're like, well, what do you enjoy? And they're like, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And when we
I don't
say
know
like,
who I am.
yeah. And when we say like better parent, what we mean by that is more emotionally in tune, more able to be there because your cup is full. Right.
The parent that you want to be, the parent that like deep down where you're, you know, it's the contrast of if you're going to bed at night being like, I failed today. Yeah. It's the opposite of that is the parent you desire to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know you don't look good and bad.
Right.
You're
exactly.
like aligned.
And it means different. It's different for everyone. What do you want to be? What do you want your day to look like?
What type of parent do you think I am? Or what would you categorize me as?
I think you're probably a fireball parent because most of our fireball parents are more experienced parents who have learned you're going to burn out. You cannot take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. If you are giving, never looking inward, never focusing on what motivates you and bringing that more healthy balance into your parenting and leading from a place of, I've got to fill my cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's the phrase we love to use for fireballs.
You know what the interesting part is? I would agree with that. And I think we already had this conversation when you were previously. Everything that I do, like to get myself to the gym this morning, it was for my kids or for my clients. I do everything that I do internally to self-coach, to take action on something is typically for somebody else. Although I know it is self-serving, meaning like I'm going to feel great or I'm going to benefit from this, I still have a tremendous amount of guilt. But I observe the guilt and I'm like, how is this guilt? Like my big kick right now is how is this guilt saving the world? How is this guilt allowing my children to become better adults? How is this? And it's not when I process it internally, but it's still I have so much resistance around considering my needs.
Well, so that's interesting because that's how I feel. And that's why I call myself a crescent with a fireball rising. So I also, think, okay, I want like after this call, I want to go for a walk because I haven't been outside for a couple of hours. That's important. I thought you
were going to say days, but that's been me too.
A couple of hours. Someone is going to want to come with me. I'm going to say no because I'm going to need a moment to myself. We've been recording podcasts for a couple hours this morning. I need to just not talk to anybody for a little while. I will feel guilty about that. Yeah. But it's still okay for me to say no. It doesn't mean that I'm going to come back and spend time with them this afternoon. I spent time with them this morning, Yeah.
So are you a crescent then, Heather?
I would identify more of that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I had this conversation. I have this struggle every day. Yesterday, so it's beautiful outside, and there's a paddleboard place down the street, and I love adventure, and I like, come on, kids. Oh my gosh, it was like pulling teeth. They're like, I don't want to go. And then we got there. I was like, fine, we don't have to go. Let's just get out of the house. And the woman who owns it is becoming like a friend. And I was kind of like, I'm like, ooh, can we hang out? And she has small kids. And she goes, yeah, let's go for like a sunrise paddle one time. And she goes, we don't have to bring the kids. And I felt guilty. And I should totally just be there. But my kids are like, Mom, I don't care. I do not care. You're going to be gone for an hour. And I use my children as a scapegoat. Like I use them to block my joy. And I see it, and I see how all my clients do it, and like most women that I know, and the opposite, women who don't have children using like, I don't have kids. And I was like, stop, it's okay. I'm like, I love having friends that don't have children because you teach me so much about not losing myself. And I teach you about not feeling guilty for not having kids. And it's just, I think innately as women, there's this like, culturally, like we're supposed to do certain things. And it's just so fucked and how we show up and the guilt and the shame around, oh my gosh, even me, this last year, I'm making this all about me, but last year, I really dove into food and oh my gosh, to make myself a meal that is already cooked, like pre-cooked, like chicken, asparagus, like whatever's in the fridge. All I have to do is heat it up. And the kids are eating, their meal. Not that I'm making extra food. It's actually not that difficult. But the act of me just making one serving for myself, the whole time I'm like, oh, I feel so guilty. I need to make so much more for everybody else. Even this morning. And I'm like, stop in my head. And I can't tell you, fueling my body with adequate nutrition has given my children life. They could literally spit in my face and throw a tantrum in front of me. And I'm like, I got you. And I'm so much less reactive because one of my basic human needs is being met. And I'm just like, this is so fucked that as a woman, I have to coach myself. I don't want to say 24 hours a day. When I'm not sleeping, I have to mentally coach myself to choose myself again and again and again. And people think it's so easy. And I'm like, you have no idea what goes on in my head.
No, you do make it look so easy.
This is so crescent. This is what this is. This is the struggle of a crescent. This is literally what goes through a crescent mind, especially a crescent mind who is understanding that they are trying to be more of a fireball. Crescents have insane strengths. They're really, really good at being in tune to their kids. They're advocates. They're nurturers. They love that, but they also have to continuously talk themselves out of being there 24/7 and giving themselves that opportunity and that permission to choose themselves first.
Damn.
Well, and also
goals, fireball goals.
What you're bringing up though is a really, really important piece, because the more research we do into the parenting perspectives, we've started to identify that there's, a spectrum of your child's needs are over here and your needs are at the other end of the spectrum. And we don't want to be on either end where we're not focusing on the other. Right. But the crescent perceives more needs for their child than the fireball perceives. So when you said, when I make myself a healthy meal, I feel guilty about it, because your crescent tendency is to perceive that your child also has the need to eat the same meal that you're eating at the same time.
Or eat again when you just fed them.
Right. Right.
Whereas a fireball will not perceive that as a need. My child is, like you said, the paddleboarding thing. They don't even want to go paddleboarding. But you perceive it as something they will be happy doing, or they need to do, or they will gain joy from. And so you feel that need and then the guilt associated with it. So it's like this whole perspective on not just the way you interact with your child, but the way you interact with other adults. You said the woman who owns the paddleboarding company, the way you're interacting with her is possibly bringing up feelings of guilt. The way you interact with your spouse, with friends, it is just so layered into all the decisions that we make.
And I live in a house with 4 male brains, and they process very differently than the female brain. It is mind-blowing to me. My husband's like, I'm still focused on that tree, and you've already had this whole conversation with yourself about whatever. And I'm like, really? Like, women can multitask. Like, the female brain can multitask. Like, we are built and wired very differently. And so when I'm observing my children, I'm like, Heather, this isn't even in their consciousness. And not only that, he's 8 years old and he's playing Legos. He does not think that you are a shitty parent because you decided to go for an hour-long walk by yourself. He wouldn't have even noticed if you were downstairs folding laundry or not. Like, it's just mind-blowing. But the narratives, the awareness of your narrative, I think is key, because people will say, how do you get over guilt? How do you get over fear? How do you get over these things? I'm like, when I find the person or the perfect strategy, I'll let you know. I just don't allow that to run my life anymore, because I experience the contrast, which is feeling like shit. And I refuse to live my life like that now. So I'm curious about this whole feeling like crap. How exhausted can you be as the cultural identity of motherhood? And yes, I hear it all the time. Oh, my children are young. And then I will get an experienced parent who has like multiple children. She's like, I've hired a night nurse and I've stopped feeling guilty for it. Or we sleep train as soon as it comes out of the womb, or like just these things about the wisdom and expertise. I'm like, why the fuck do we have to like kill ourselves to learn these things? Why can't we just give ourselves permission? Or you're like, I hired this support and it's really easy. And I'm waiting for something bad to happen because everyone else has told me how hard it's going to be. And it's not that hard for me. So yeah, curious your perspective.
I think that has a huge part to do with setting yourself up in a community. Having older, more experienced parents, not necessarily a generation up, because sometimes it's hard to take advice from people who are your elders that by that much, your parents, your in-laws, because we feel defensive. We say to ourselves, well, they don't remember how it was, or things have changed. But, somebody who's a few years ahead of you, somebody who's going alongside you, somebody who is your peer, who's chosen a slightly different path. Americans, I'll speak for Americans, we have this attitude like mothers should be able to do everything on their own. We should not ask for help. If you're asking for help, you are showing some form of weakness. And instead, what we're trying to do with the parents that we work with in our community is say, no, it was never supposed to be this way. When anthropologists look at the way humans evolved, they have come to the realization that a human child takes so much work, consumes so many calories, requires so many years of care that we could not have evolved to this point if we had not done it in communities, sharing that responsibility. So why on earth have we decided that we need to be able to do it by ourselves and do it well, never complain, don't ask for help, and that's the end of the story? If we shift gears and we recognize that we're not supposed to be able to do it by ourselves, and we start to at least have the conversation in a community setting with other people who are going through what we're going through, which is what we really attempt to do, and we start to say, oh gosh, I'm struggling with that too. What are you doing? How does it look on in your household? And we start to just at least swap stories. Like, that's just a good starting point. This is what I'm doing. Have you tried this? And then we start to be able to acknowledge there might be other ways of doing things. There might be wisdom that I can glean from these experiences that other parents are having. It's like the tiniest little sliver. It's a little tiny, tiny seed of a starting point for, let's shift this paradigm a little bit. Let's assume we can't do it by ourselves. We don't have all the answers. And then we start to grow beyond that. Oh, I might actually need to ask for help. So by the time the parents come into our community, into our membership program called The Neighborhood, they're acknowledging, I actually need a little more help than I can get from reading a book, from listening to a podcast, from just talking with my neighbor who's got the same thing happening in their house. I need a little more one-on-one, hands-on support. And so that's where we can really make some growth, because then we start to pick things apart and say, I hear what you're saying. I acknowledge your struggles. I know you can't do it by yourself. Here we are, all ready to support you. Let's break this thing down and talk about what is actually going on in your household with your child and with you. And then we start to be really reflective and provide that support in a way that is coming through with love and not judgment. So many of us are just afraid to have the conversation in the first place.
Yeah, the shame. Sarah, curious what you think.
I love Evie's answer, because we've talked about this a lot. And this is always the answer that we come to, is that it was never meant to be this way. In the military community, we know this. When I first had my first child, we were living in Kansas, and someone who knew me, that I just became a mom, said to me, hire a babysitter. And I said, I can't do that. What are you talking about? I just became a stay-at-home mom. Why would I do that? She said, hire a babysitter. You have to. Once a week, you need to hire a babysitter, or twice a week, or whatever. But it needs to be always a few hours here and there. Your husband's not going to be around. Trust me. And it was that big sister vibe kind of thing. And it took me about a year and a half, but I did.
I was going to say, did you get angry or defensive when she said that to you?
No, okay. Because of the way that it was very loving. She had much more experience at that point. She'd been a military wife for a lot longer. She had multiple children. She knew what I was about to experience. And I didn't. And she said, I had done deployments, but we hadn't had kids. It was very different. And she said, you're going to be on your own 24/7 for months at a time. It's okay for you not to be alone. You don't have family nearby. You're not going to have grandparents that are right here, aunts and uncles. And every time we would move and I would see, like I would make a friend and then I would realize that that friend had her sister living by or her parents. And then I would like, oh, well, this person isn't going to need a friend because they have family. They don't need a friend like I need a friend. And so I did, but it took me a while. But after a year and a half, I hired a babysitter for one time a week for like 3 hours. And I was very careful with that time. I was in school at the time and I would use that time to do my homework because I felt like I had to be productive. Like, oh, I've got the babysitter. I got to do something that doesn't make me feel guilty for having the babysitter. I should be doing homework. I shouldn't just be like going to get my nails done because that's silly. Well, that evolved even more to where I allowed myself more childcare, more time. And years later, it became, I actually went back to work and got someone who would take care of my kids when I was at work because I stopped. And even still, I have that guilt of, oh, wow, like, is this okay? Why do I not feel like it's okay? I'm still there for them. I'm still with them all the time, every day. I spend time with them. My husband constantly reassures me that it's okay. He's very supportive and understand, but it was the way that the message that was given to me early on, which wasn't given to Evie. There wasn't anybody in her life that told her that she could leave her daughter with someone. And so she didn't for like 2 years. And when she did, it was me who she left her child with.
But that's that community. The only person I trusted to leave my child with when I was that new scared mom was Sarah, because I had built that sense of trust with her. I knew my child was safe in her hands. And we all need a Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah, you need to be everybody's Sarah.
That was really cute. That was really sweet. But
that's like a bumper sticker. We all need a Sarah.
That's so cute. It's so funny though, because I feel like that permission, someone gave me permission to not be alone.
Mm-hmm. Dang. I remember my early days. I fell head first, feet first. Whatever. I wasn't even if I fell. I just my face against the shitty part of motherhood. I was so terrified of failing as a mother because I was so young that I knew I just discounted my intuition because I was still like the little rebel questioner. And I was like, she looks successful, like in her mothering, she looks happy, right? Instagram perfect. But that was before Instagram existed. But it was like, oh, she looks Instagram perfect. So I'm going to do whatever she does. And even though it was like, no, not this, not this, not this. And then I'd be like, oh, is this supposed to feel like shit? Yep, you're doing it right. Oh, okay, I'll do it more. Yes. But there was I had a cousin who had 4 of her own children. She's probably about 10 years older than me. 4 of her own children. She was a foster parent at the same time. So it'd be like 7 kids in her house at once. And she was my big sister. And I would go to her house and she'd make her own almond milk. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? That looks disgusting. And she really showed me, and she had this community vibe. And then she would just give me all of her children at once. And I had to like figure it out. I had 1. I'm like, 1 to 7, this is not a fair trade. Like, what did I get myself into? But I learned really quickly, like the community sense. And we talk about it now. I was like, you would come over to my house and I would be freaking out because my kid was screaming or something. And you would just, she had her own attachment parenting, conscious parenting vibe, like let go of this, And then I taught her a lot too about healing. And it was just this community thing. But at the beginning, I'm like, there's something about the way that you're parenting that I'm attracted to. And these moms at this mom group that are trying to make it look perfect, there's something going on here. But there is that sense of community. And if you can't find it, you create it. And the last year, and let's talk a little bit about your membership community that you have, because the last year, a lot of people have resistance to the online stuff. And I know we're all zoomed out, but my whole world for the last 10 plus years, most of my parenting has been online community, because that seems to be where I find my people, not in geographic, like in person, like, yeah, sure. But usually I'm the one leading them because I don't like the other communities that I find. So I create what I need. But there is beauty that you can get your needs met of that isolation and that connection that you're craving through an online space and platform. So I would love for you to talk about yours, because it's something I don't offer in my community.
So this goes back to my little house in DC. I had a red door, and her daughter, Evie, and her daughter used to come over, and her daughter would knock on the cute little red door and they would come in and play. And so the red door became the idea behind this neighborhood, right? Knock on the door and someone's always going to be there, and you can come in and you can play and you can talk and you can relax. You can have fun. You can ask for advice. You can offer advice. You can have solidarity. And that is what the neighborhood is. It is the like online version of our daily play dates, right? But it has a couple of facets. There's a teaching facet to it, where every week we're teaching a strategy based around a parenting strategy, but based on the parenting perspective. So if we're talking about tantrums and children throwing tantrums or listening skills or any of those types of things, because my background is in early childhood education, I have a doctorate. So it is my professional background, but also what we're doing is talking about it through the framework and saying, hey, crescents, this is something you're going to be really good at. Hey, constellations, you're going to be really good at this too, but you got to watch this part of it, because this is going to be hard for you because you're a constellation, because you're a crescent, whatever it is. And so they take our quiz, they figure out who they are, and then we do everything through that lens, which really, really helps them understand themselves. So it's not just about, here's a parenting strategy, go try it. It's how is your perspective and personality going to affect how you try it and how you succeed or where you meet your challenges. So there's that piece. Then there's a live piece where Evie and I are on Zoom and people come and chat with us and ask us questions and we work through issues together. It's exactly what you would do if you were sitting there having coffee with your friends and someone said, oh my God, my kid's gotten up 10 times last night. I don't know what to do. Then you have like 4 friends sitting there and they're like, oh, well, here's what I do. Here's what I do. That's what this is. They have a private community forum where they can type and write all week long when there isn't a live session. And so there's just all these ways to connect. And that's really what we wanted to give. And it's for moms and dads, anyone who's caring for a child ages 2 to 7.
I love it. And where can they find this online?
They can find it at community.evieandsarah.com. And the last thing I'd like to chime in about with regard to the neighborhood is that it's a place to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's missing from a lot of the parenting conversations, to actually say what's going on in our homes and not be worried about the parent shaming, the judgment, you're doing it wrong. We have found that people that end up in this community are ready to be honest and truthful and reflective and vulnerable. And that is when we see the most growth, when you can really be honest about who you are and what you bring to your parenting, your strengths and your baggage, and then move forward from there. So that this is just really a magical group of people. They are fantastically wonderful parents, caring and kind.
And so it's international. We have a mom in there who lives in Italy. We have a mom in there who lives in the UK. And that's super cool because they get a chance to explain their perspective and what they would do in their culture and country.
Yeah. That was one of, I highly recommend everyone go check that out. And we'll put the links in the show notes, and we'll talk about Instagram and your book in a second. But that was one of my biggest aha moments when I started podcasting, and I would get responses back from different countries. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not a one culture thing. Like, this is global. Right. And yes, there's different issues or challenges in each different culture. But there was this collective desire and need. And I think, the second we step out of this isolation of this is how I feel, or you go, oh, I'm not alone, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not alone. And then I ask that question one step further, what are you going to do about it? And how do you want to feel? Because we can know collectively that there's a need or an isolation or a disconnect in contrast. And now I'm like, what are you going to do about it? Right? It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to feel like shit all the time. That's my point. It doesn't have to feel like crap all the time.
We always say that. We're like, it doesn't have to be this hard. You don't have to go to bed being like, oh my God, how did I do this again? How do I do it again tomorrow?
Yeah. Life is challenging, but it's like, face it, right? Don't run away from it. And when you're facing it with other people, it can get a lot easier. So where can everyone find you? Your book, the podcast, Instagram. I always encourage people to go to Instagram, send you a DM and say, hey, I listened to you on this podcast and this was my biggest takeaway. So all the things. And I'll just keep holding this up here.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
People can find us at evieandsarah.com. It's EVIE and SARAH. And we're at Evie and Sarah on Instagram and Facebook and all the places. And our book is available on Amazon or wherever you like to buy books.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been such a refreshing conversation. And I'm just so grateful for both of you.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I love talking to you because you really just get into everything. And I just love going underneath the surface.
Oh,
absolutely. And thank you for the work that you do.
What did you say?
Thank you for the work that you do and for being vulnerable, because I definitely would have pegged you as a fireball, but now hearing your story as a crescent, I feel like I understand you so much better.
Oh yeah. People think I'm wildly extroverted, and I'm like, I am painfully introverted. And it is, the assumptions we make about other people and their lives. And then when you really get to know people, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more there. There's so much.
I love it.
Well, that's it. And I wanted to thank you for listening today, because I truly believe you are exactly where you need to be. And now I have a favor to ask. In exchange for the value you've gained from this free podcast, I'd be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Share the show with at least one woman in your life who you feel would benefit, and or take a screenshot and share it on social media. And always feel free to tag me at Heather Chauvin. The world does not benefit from your guilt and fatigue. The world needs more women who are willing to unlearn everything they've been taught. Women who are courageous enough to feel good and not let guilt run the show. I believe you are that courageous woman. To see if my community and coaching is the right fit for you and your big vision, the relationships you desire, the money, time, energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating, then head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me, and take the next step in the right direction. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. And if you have a personal question or topic you'd like me to answer on the podcast, text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. You are so worthy of feeling good. Now go do some scary shit.